Evo počet ćemo sa nastavkom panela.
We will now continue with the second part, resistance to disasters, natural disasters. I invite our two panelists to join me here, and we will proceed.
Drugi deo.
The second part of the panel is financial resilience, what policies are integrated, financial policies that the government needs to put in place to be financially resilient to future financial disasters. The first panelist is Jelena Miljković, advisor to the Minister of the Ministry of Finance. Since 2014, she's been in the ministry, first as consultant, now advisor of the minister. She worked as university teacher and has many years of experience in international financial institutions. She was active in drafting the DRR financing plan adopted by Serbia in March 2017, and generally she will be talking about financial plans for this purpose. Microphone, please. First of all, let me thank you for the invitation and for this opportunity to present the results of work of the government and the Ministry of Finance in the preceding period. As you know, in 2014, the flooding which hit us had a big impact on the national budget, and we identified at that time that natural disasters are one of the key intrinsic risks. The funds that we had available at that time in the national budget appropriated for such purposes certainly was not sufficient. And we then agreed, working together with the PIMO office, and as Sandra mentioned, the government adopted the plan in March. And for your information, let me say why this is a big fiscal risk for the budget of the Republic of Serbia. Is cash-based, meaning that all funds appropriated this year have to be utilized this year. There is no possibility to save it for the coming period, meaning whatever is allocated for emergencies, if there is no emergency or a disaster, will not be transferred to the following year to be used for the same purposes. Some of the sources of funding first are funds for compensation. In 2017, 570 million dinars. There is also the standing budgetary reserves and the current budgetary reserves, 2 billion. So these are all funds that can be used in case of a natural disaster. And exactly for this reason, we were searching for other possible sources of funding and working together with the World Bank. This year, we agreed and signed a loan of $70 million as a standby loan arrangement in case of a natural disaster. We can, in such case, withdraw such funds. The program for risk financing defined 3 levels that we need to work on in order to improve sources of funding. First is the national, second the local, and the third is individual. So, apart from the World Bank standby loan, which is no limitation to collecting other funds, of course, like we did in 2014, but as for the World Bank loan, this money is to be withdrawn only when certain things happen and when natural disasters reach a certain level and the unutilized funds remain available for the coming years. And when we repay what was utilized, we come back to the 70 million amount, which should be sufficient for the initial response, initial costs. As for the local level, and I think my colleague will be saying more on that, in the program we defined that there is need, of course, to raise awareness because, yes, we discuss natural disasters when they occur, then we look for ways of how to increase funding, but we need at local level to do more. And there are discussions going on now with the units of local self-government to ensure their budgets. Some municipalities had this practice in previous years, but then after some years that they do so, they decide maybe next year they will not provide funds in the budget for this purpose. And this is very much our mentality, obviously, in Serbia, because the fact that it didn't occur this year maybe makes it more likely to occur next year, not the other way around. But anyway, we need to raise awareness of what is available in the market and to raise awareness of the need for local governments to ensure their budgets to be able to sustain costs when they occur. And there is the individual level, of course, citizens themselves who need to understand that they need to protect their property, protect it and insure it, because if they don't do it themselves, we will have unrealistic expectations. And there will be costs then that will remain uncovered, because it is not for the state to cover all costs. So every owner of any property needs to protect his own property. According to the DRR plan, we stated that by 2020 we should have 5% of the population who will have their property insured. That's part of the plan. In 2014, the situation was that of all those affected at that time, only 2.5% of the population had their property insured, which you will agree is very, very low. In the coming years, we have planned a number of these seemingly small steps, being aware of the current financial situation in the country, being aware that not everyone can afford insurance. Again, it will be my friend who will say more about how much it costs. But what we can do as government is try to insure the public property to a greater degree. And we will continue to work on this, and I hope that we will be seeing better indicators in the future. Yes, in the past 2 years we've managed to do quite a lot.
Hvala, Jelena.
Thank you, Jelena. A round of applause. Our next speaker is Mariana Lemić-Saramandić. Mariana is Chief Underwriting Officer of Europa, 23 years of professional experience in insurance and reinsurance. Before she was appointed as the Executive Director, she was the Regional Manager for Serbia and Macedonia. Mariana, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this conference. Truly, I'm pleased that today in Serbia we're discussing this topic and that we identified a problem. Because the first step in resolving a problem is identifying it. Of course, natural disasters not only have negative impact on fiscal stability, but they also could have deep implications on the macroeconomic performances and the total economic competitiveness of every country. Unfortunately, we felt this in Serbia after the 2014 floods, but also after the droughts in 2012 and then again in 2017, because GDP was seriously affected. Of course, in order to cover the losses in damages from the natural disasters, many countries turn to some additional budget funds which are emergently needed. This is usually done either through reallocation of the budget funds or with additional budget loaning. But in Serbia today, citizens are always expecting that the state is the one who should cover the damages from the natural disasters, regardless of how many negative implications this will have on the development of society and the state as a whole. So in this regard, we believe that it is really needed we will need to approach to this in a systematic way in order to resolve this problem. And this conference today is precisely showing that we are moving in this direction. We've talked to many local self-governments, and if the 2014 floods were to repeat again, we can say that right now in the current situation, which is somewhat a status quo, let's say, but many local self-governments will be faced with the inability to adequately respond, to immediately start with recovery of infrastructure, to re-establish municipal services, precisely because of the limitation of the budget funds and, of course, uncertainty when it comes to the donation assistance. We cannot expect that the donations from 2014 will repeat. So the state has already taken a step by taking a loan from the World Bank, and this shows that we are working on this. But this is only a small segment. I would like to reiterate here that those funds are limited. You cannot expect that the damages would be completely covered. You can compensate one part of the damages, but definitely a good part of those damages would be, in a way, it would be impossible to compensate. In this sense, Europa Re is actually an agency for implementation of the World Bank project for insurance in Southeastern Europe and Central Asia from insurance for natural disasters. The main role is to develop new mechanisms for risk transfers and help governments of Southeastern Europe and local self-governments to find mechanisms to protect from financial consequences of natural disasters. So in this regard, Europa Re, together with the Public Investment Management Office, in the past 2 years, we've been intensively working on developing new financial instruments. And we're expecting that the first instruments will be applied already in January of this year. We were focused on 25 local self-governments in the basin of the Western Morava River and in the Kolubara River basin, and we're hoping that those will be the first local self-governments who will really show that they learned about all the advantages of financial protection against natural disasters. I think that one of the questions for this panel was what the state can do when it comes to raising awareness and popularizing financial instruments and financial protection in general. We believe that without a comprehensive action, meaning education, in educational institutions, but also in local self-governments. Without this, there will be no results. It's necessary, as Jelena said, to enable protection on all levels. One thing is a national level, then we have the local level, but on the other hand, we have citizens and commerce who are still leaning on the state, relying on the state too much. We had a huge problem after the 2014 floods to explain to donors and both the developmental organizations how it is possible that someone who is investing all his life in their house or in a business, they do not feel the need to protect this, to ensure this, and to show responsibility for what they've made. No, but simply everybody is relying on the state, and the state cannot finance this on its own. Therefore, the role of insurance companies really is extremely important. But it's a question of how easy it is to sell an insurance policy for protection of floods or earthquake. If the citizens are expecting that actually, in case of this happening, the state will be the one who will providing assistance. And I think that right here, we need to work a lot more on this. The citizens and the businesses need to understand that just like the state on one hand is approaching this problem responsibly, they also need to give their contribution. So at the very end, I would just like to say, somehow in the light of climate changes and all the analysis done by the World Bank and the United Nations, and the fact that we're expecting that the natural disasters will become even more intensive and more frequent, we simply must work on improving this system, on improving the new mechanisms, whether this will this will take a certain number of years, more or less. But it's important that we're working on this, and then it's important to start working on this. And this conference, I think, is confirming this. And of course, the efforts put in by the state and now even by the private sector in all of this, the efforts are put in to increase the resilience on the local communities, because we believe that the financial ability of the local community to respond to natural disasters actually represents the crucial element for management, for disaster risk management. That would be it from me. Thank you. Thank you, Mariana. I would like to open the discussion now. If the audience has any questions. Oh, we already have 2 questions. If we could hand the microphone. Good afternoon. I would like to greet everybody who's here. I would like to greet the moderator and 2 ladies. I have a question for both of them. I would like to ask specifically for Mrs. Jelena a question. You mentioned that you have the money that is not spent, allocated for natural disasters, which is at the end of the year. If there's no disaster, it goes into some other purposes. I assume some relocated to some other parts of the budget. Are you planning some activities to have this money in some prevention works for the local communities, undeveloped local communities? We've heard about some mechanisms, financial instruments. You know about this, we have this recommendation. Is there a possibility for the state to help certain undeveloped local communities, or to give them money for prevention and to strengthen them in this way, so that this money still goes into something that will be a preparation for resilience of the community in case of disaster? And for Mrs. Mariana, is the Europa Re that we're cooperating with them, I have to say. Did you think about an regional online platform maybe, where you could give a system of education for the local communities, to have them become familiar with this topic, to start them thinking, and to make this process more functional, so that these local communities do not wait for somebody to come to them? They should maybe start with some initiative towards Europa Re or some other financing institutions, in order to get some money if they already do not have the money in their budget. And I would like to use this opportunity, if I'm not too boring, maybe I would like to show you a short film. Since I'm coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I work in a regional company who's operating in Bosnia, Serbia, and Montenegro, I would like to show you here what we've already done in the Brčko district, where precisely the things that we heard about in the previous session. We digitalized and transferred all the experiences from the assessments of threats. We transferred all the hazards from the district. You know that the district was one of the most affected parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And 30 million euros was the damages. More than 25% of the budget of the Brčko district was affected. So in cooperation with the World Bank, we had a nice project, and very quickly, by the end of next month, around the 20th of December, we will have a conference where we will officially present this. So right now, in District Brčko, we precisely know the vulnerable categories. We digitalized all the facilities, all the households, all the public institutions, all the critical infrastructure, everything that is important and that can tomorrow, maybe in a likely scenario, for example, flood, that has already affected us. It affected us in 2014. This can happen again to Brčko district. But do not forget that we can have the worst case scenario, that this flood can be even more disastrous. Just very practical example, Slovenia has already put up their embankments, raised the level of 1.5 by 1.5 meters. Croatia is doing this. This water will be coming first to Bosnia and then to Croatia. And then to Serbia. It's important that everybody at all levels starts with their activities. We from the private sector, we have to work on this in order to survive. Of course, I see that the states, I would like to congratulate Serbia on having some very active plans on developing financial instruments. But we see that with the joint efforts, with synergy, we can do a lot. Thank you. We have another question. So another question, then we'll hear answers. Good afternoon once again, Slobodan Knežević from the Association for Protection of Birds, BirdLife International. My question is for Jelena Miljković from the Ministry of Finance. If we agree the fact that investing in protection of nature and environment is precisely investing in resilience of our society in accordance with all UN standards, my question would be focused to what happens with what's happening with the Green Fund, which is existing within the Ministry of Finance. Where does the money go from the Green Fund? And if it doesn't go into nature, where is it going? If we're not investing in there's damage done to nature, so if we're not returning resources to nature, I'm afraid that we're not investing in resilience and sustainability of the society. So this is my question. What's going on with the Green Fund? Maybe will it be dislocated from the Ministry of Finance? Do we have any other question? No, then I would like to kindly ask Jelena to answer. Thank you for the questions. Concerning your question about the finances, as I said in the beginning, taking into account the funds that we allocate in the budget for the damages by disasters this year, this was around 600 million dinars. You will agree that this is not a huge amount of money, depending on which disaster hits us. Of course, this year we had drought. And what we had in the beginning of the year, we had a severe winter. This also caused some other problems. We do not have this. We don't have a large amount of funds that can be transferred to the next year. What's crucial is that the law and the budget system does not allow us to do this. We cannot transfer funds from one year to the next. That's why there's no possibility to create such funds which would accumulate funds. When it comes to the question, is the state helping local self-governments? Of course, we have transfers towards local self-governments, depending on the needs and on the operations of the local self-governments. So in this area, we're trying to first the local self-government need to recognize themselves, recognize the need to protect their budget. I agree, there are certain local self-governments which are undeveloped, which have bigger financial problems compared to others. That's why we're trying to see what models can be used to instigate them, to stimulate them and help them in the future. But it's important to start. I mean, this is an example that these local self-governments who have the possibilities, who have the funds, they need to show by their example, lead by example, how you work properly, how to protect the budget, the money. So yes, definitely we are planning for the future to work on raising the awareness and everything that can be done in this part to help them to protect their budget and to have the funds for these purposes. I would like to thank you for your question. The question was, so is Europa thinking about developing an online platform? I have to say that at this point in time, we still think that local self-governments are not mature enough to apply themselves to the online platform and to ask for such financial instruments. Our experience is that after a large number of discussions and presenting all the risks to them, all the risks that certain local self-governments are exposed to, only after that they start thinking about this topic and truly seeing the need to protect themselves financially. The position is usually that until a specific situation happens, they do not think about this. And that's something that we're trying to change, to really first get them acquainted with all the risks that they are exposed to, so that they themselves can try to, in a way, see through all the functions they have towards the citizens, of course, the obligation towards the assets they're protecting, and then find mechanisms to financially protect this. So maybe in a future period, definitely, when a certain number of local self-governments, let's say, break the ice, when they really enter this story with financial protection, only then we can expect that in one of the next phases, the other municipalities and local self-governments can simply follow this example.
Da li idemo po redu, kako je ko pitao. Što se tiče...
As for the green fund, you said it is not functional. I don't have this information. Maybe you know more of this, that they are not used for the proper purposes. I couldn't really comment. I didn't know what you meant by this, that we are not using. Maybe you can tell me what they are used for. If you cannot, I don't have this information with me. Yes, that's sufficient that you don't have it. Thank you very much. Other questions? Dragoš Radovanović, City Administration of Kragujevac. A brief question for Jelena. We are discussing here reconstruction, providing funding, national level, local level. We have huge problems at local level to provide funds for prevention, and this is where we are asking for your assistance to create budgets for this purpose. The budget system law does not have this function. Many local governments do not have programs for prevention. So we are always talking how we will reconstruct and recover, from which budget line, but that's one thing. The other thing that is that local governments have problems to fund preventive measures. Possibly with the new law, you will be adding to the competencies of the municipalities. We will see. So I'd like to hear from you how the budget system law and this area that I'm talking about will be or can be harmonized. As for the budgets of local governments, you know that the Ministry of Finance is providing certain guidelines on how to make projections of expenditures and incomes. We do not have competencies in this respect to tell you what you budget, what you include in your budget for your next year. We can only do recommendations, like we will be giving with the program for DRR. It is certainly up to the local government to recognize the problem. You are right in saying that apart from dealing with the problem once it occurs, we need also to think preventively. For this purpose, certain municipalities did this to protect their property and their region. Yes, you're right, we need to invest in prevention and preparedness, but the initiative for this must also come from the local level, although with the support of the national level. When you plan your expenditures in your budget, of course, you include your priorities. Currently, many units of local government have surplus, meaning they need to just set priorities. The government also cannot do everything from the wish list. We need also to have priorities and what we want to commit to. But I think local governments have to do more or less the same. It's back to me. It's good to see that someone has a surplus in the budget. It's not much a practice in the region. Let me add something about the Brčko project and answer the question. We identified risks, we did a risk management, and we also had a study of capacity building. We did an action plan to accompany that, and we introduced in our local budget a budget line for investments, and this action plan is in fact how we plan to develop our protection and rescue system in the Brčko district for the coming 3 years. So they will know specific actions and measures for the next 3 years, budgetary sources, non-budgetary sources, loans. So you do it in parallel. You do an assessment, a study, a program, and sources of funding. Another question here from the audience. The new law that Mr. Maric mentioned will oblige units of local government to do your risk reduction plans. The first initial document is the risk assessment document, and then later on you will have your preventive document that you are to put in place to make your local government more resilient. And then, in line with the program budgets, you will allocate funds. We have Žarko Petrovic from UNDP. Thank you very much. Firstly, let me say that I fully agree what Ms. Saramandic said about raising awareness of the need for insurance as sharing the risk. This certainly will be with us, all individuals and all communities who have property. I wish to note the need for associated or blended finance that is becoming a very important and good mode of financing development. Talking about DRR, we mean investing public funds into some aspects of disaster risk reduction that would then enable generation of private funds and investment by companies and individuals, so that the final result would be blended funding by the public and the private sector. And people from the insurance industry, of course, know about this. To do this, we need open data, which we mentioned in the first session. But my question now for you is whether the ministry is thinking of such options. And maybe this is a question for participants from other countries, whether there is a way plan and allocate funds for blended funding by a number of local governments or by a combination of national and local level, or even with support of loans or private funds, which could, on the one hand, reduce risks for the community, and on the other hand, could generate profit. Right after the 2014 flooding, there was much thinking about dual and triple purpose facilities and structures that would, on the one hand, lead the flooding wave when it comes, and afterwards would be fertile land, or would be used as water reservoirs for irrigation purposes. Can you tell us whether there is thinking along these lines?
Well, to say that we're definitely, by adopting this program this year, we definitely first open the door for further thinking and analysis. We're definitely working and cooperating with Europa on options, on all the instruments that would be available to the local self-governments. Definitely, we're not running away from this. The state is not running away from this. The part that if we need to show by example how to protect yourself from risk and which methods for prevention are used, we will show this. Somebody from the audience mentioned this, so not just recovery but also prevention, because we understand that this is primarily, I mean, okay, it means allocating money in the beginning. It is expensive, and it seems at that moment that it could cost us a lot, but now we have very good results. So maybe for the first time we have the chance to think about where to invest money next. I mean, you will have to agree that in order to invest money in prevention, we need funds. I mean, thank God now with the policies that we're implementing, we've reached this point that we can allocate more funds. So definitely, if this trend continues, we will definitely, as a state, as a government, continue investing as much as possible in developing these models. I would just like to add, I apologize, I am a facilitator here, but I would just add something to Yelena's story as her colleague. That is in the action plan for implementing the priorities and objectives of the government, which was adopted last month, beginning of this month. The second priority objective is developing private-public partnerships. So through developing these partnerships, we can talk from this side. We can talk about blended financing of the private sector and budgetary money, whether from the money from the central budget or from the local self-government budget. But the answer to you will get the answer to your question tomorrow. Although you participated as a support to initiative in the Republic of Serbia, because tomorrow we will have a panel concerning the resilience of the units of local self-governments of cities and municipalities. We will hear good examples tomorrow how blended and finance, how jointly local self-governments can respond to all those challenges and risks they are facing every day, let's say. If there are no any other questions, I would close this panel. If you have any questions, please. If not, okay, we have one more question.
In English? Okay. First of all, thank you very much to UNDP Serbia. I'm coming from UNDP Turkey. My name is Nuri. And I would like to recall the question from the colleague from the NGO. There is a new concept, anti-fragility, and the anti-fragility is different than the resilience. And actually resilience is to resist the shocks and make it same. However, anti-fragility to make it better. So the interlinkages between the sustainable development goals, including the gender part, biodiversity, and all the others, would give us some, opportunities to find out to make it better. So I would like to thank you and just highlighted this kind of issues, the anti-fragility, during these DRR issues. Thank you very much.
Hvala. Da li imamo, ovo je više bila konstatacija, manje bilo pitanje.
This was more of a statement, not a question, so yes. Do we have any other question from the audience? Then we can slowly conclude this meeting. In today's panel, we had two parts. The first part, I think, answered all the questions that you asked. In the first panelist said that the human factor is extremely important in this process, socioeconomic aspect, with the focus on the human factor, people, at all levels, not just institutions and not just in the state, in all levels of government, national, local institutions, but also in general, citizens, NGO sector, private sector. So our citizens, everybody should participate, nobody should be neglected. Then the technologies definitely could help us. We saw this in the example, practical example from the Brčko district, where today's advancements in the science and technology can contribute to this process, especially in collecting data, processing data, and in exchanging data, because we all know, everybody who participated in the process, you know that information and data are something that's necessary, something that we base the decisions on the highest level. So when the information is adequately processed and when the information has reached us in the right time, then the decisions are made timely in order for our society to be resilient. For all of this, we need legal basis. We've heard and we announced a set of laws that will improve the system in the Republic of Serbia and also the system in the region. Tomorrow we will have the chance to hear something more about the systems in the countries of the region, but also in the Republic of Serbia we have a new law. This is a law on risk reduction and disaster risk management, which has a stronger focus on prevention. I mentioned disaster reduction, disaster risk plans. We also have a new institute, risk register, which will be established with this new law, where the RGZ has bigger role because we need data for this process. We also heard that there are human capacities institutions. They exist, and I always like to highlight this, that the Republic of Serbia really has experts, but they are somehow more fragmented, not linked and networked in the best possible way. Our goal should be better networking of all the people and all the institutions, everybody who's working on this task and working in this process. Also, I will try to summarize everything that we've mentioned today also. Yes, adaptation to climate changes, disaster risk reduction, those are the same measures for those two things. And in the past 10 years, maybe more than a decade, they were separated as two separate branches. But I think that now the time has come for those two things, those two processes to become unified. Because in order to be resilient to disasters, we need to monitor climate changes who are actually bringing all those more intensive disasters that are hitting us. And what we talked about now, we need to be financially ready for all the things that we need to do, all the measures that we need to implement, preventive measures, this all costs. We need money, we need time. As the director of the office said, you never have enough money and time. We who work in this process, we know this, and the colleagues who work intensively in this process on the local level also know this very well. But on the other hand, there are financial instruments. There is the money that can be used, allocated and used, but what we've observed is that we do not have enough projects. We are not ready enough to approach some financial funds and projects in order to implement those measures. But if we plan jointly, if we plan investments comprehensively and jointly, we have better chances of having better effects. I would like to thank everybody who participated, everybody who came here today. I would like to thank my panelists. Thank you very much. And I would like to invite you to come here tomorrow at 10. We will have two interesting sessions. I will not be a moderator today. We will have two new moderators today, but I will also participate tomorrow. And thank you once again.